obviously Zeekr's IPOing today. Let's dive in a little bit deeper about what our viewers should know about China, the U.S. when it comes to the EV space.
Yeah, well, look, there was news out last night that next week we are expecting new tariffs to be announced by the Biden administration, focusing on a range of items, including Chinese EVs. And that is the question top of mind for investors today. How big are the tariffs? What do they cover? And more importantly, how will the Chinese and the Communist Party react to that announcement?
Now, let's talk about more broadly, right? Let's talk more about the tech space. What do you think that are the biggest trends right now we're seeing when it comes to U.S. and China's relationships, and when it comes to our viewers and what they should know about this space?
Look, there's been an inordinate amount of focus on export controls. Now, export controls had a lot of lapses because the Commerce Department was regularly giving away licenses to some of the major producers of semiconductor equipment or chips and different technologies. So they weren't particularly successful. What we are seeing, however, is that there's a lot of focus now from Congress and from inside the Commerce Department to perhaps get stricter. The real question, I think, for markets is how do we understand how tight the rules are going to be? What are the areas which will still be allowed? There's a lot of confusion around there and a lot of lack of clarity still.
Now, I want to talk to you more about the numbers that we were hearing in this report. According to the International Energy Agency, about 60% of EV sales came from China in 2023. What factors do you see contributing to Chinese consumers when it comes to the EV demand?
Look, EV demand in China is actually far below what the production levels are at, right? So there's a very serious Chinese overcapacity issue that we hear about, which is why a lot of Chinese EVs, as a matter of fact, are exported out predominantly in Europe when we talk about Western markets. There is a price war going on in China. That's the bottom line. Companies are fighting each other to cut their prices as low as they possibly can so that they can sell more cars to Chinese consumers. But that demand may take a while to really pop back up. A lot of oversupply right now.
Now, I just want to explain to our viewers what we're seeing right now on the trading floor. We're seeing the whole executive team make their way to the distinguished guest book to sign their names in that book, which I told you about earlier. But let's talk about, furthermore, like what we should expect when it comes to U.S. and tech. Like, what are the biggest trends? What can we anticipate for 2024?
I think 2024 expect a little bit more tightness, but when we get into 2025, our view is that we are potentially seeing a second round of U.S.-China trade war, regardless of who is president. And that means not just more tariffs, but probably more action on export controls and restricting China's access to all forms of advanced technology. It's going to be bumpy, it's going to be uneven, but I think geopolitical tensions are going to be rising next year.
Let's talk more about this, right? What challenges do you see EV makers facing when it comes specifically to U.S. tariffs?
Well, if batteries are hit, that will actually have an impact because so far Chinese EV makers have largely stayed out of the U.S. market given existing tariffs. I think it all depends on policy. Do we start trying to go after factories in Mexico? Incredibly difficult to do because of USMCA, but that could potentially be a way for Chinese EV makers to avoid getting hit by American tariffs.
And what should investors know about investing in China right now?
Look, the Chinese economy is actually doing a lot better than investors would have thought. The market would have thought all of late last year, middle of last year onwards. Year-over-year growth is looking good. The Chinese consumer is going out there and they are spending money in certain areas. The big question that's hanging over this whole thing is what happens to property. If the property market can find a bottom this year, which I am optimistic it will bottom out in 2024, cyclically at least, we might have a positive China story on our hands this year.
And let's talk more about China and tech. So specifically, what do you think is working? What do you think is not working?
Well, there is a plan in China, the 5-year plans and Made in China 2025, which no longer exists in name, but it certainly does in practice, to become a dominant global player in key technologies. And the Communist Party is very much focused on it. They call it the new productive forces. They're investing in those sectors. They're privileging state firms in those sectors, providing them the loans they need. So there is a full-on industrial policy in play in China right now.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of key takeaways right there. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks.